All right.
Couldn't remember which which key which cue was the fade out, but I remembered which one it was now.
It's all good. It's all good.
Cool, man. So how's it going?
It's going, man. Another week, another 2 weeks, I guess, for us for the podcast. But we're still here.
Yeah. I'm still here. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm still here. We're still rolling right along.
Yep.
Cool. So let's just get ready. Unless you have something to say.
Oh, I don't. I was gonna ask what song was stuck in your head, but you took the words out of my mouth.
Because that's what was stuck in my head. All right. So you went last time, right?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay, cool. So there's an interesting story behind the song that's stuck in my head this week. So some friends of mine that I work with, they have a project which I'll probably make more known in like the coming weeks here. But for this project that they're doing, they needed a cover of a song, a metal song, or more of kind of like a hard rock song. And that was
already we get into it.
That song was Hero of the Day by Metallica. It turned into this because they were trying to find like a karaoke version of it, and there was one section where there was backing vocals, and they're like, no, we can't have those. We need to have it completely instrumental. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I could just try like recording it for you guys and see what happens. So that's what I did this week is I recorded an instrumental cover of Hero of the Day by Metallica. So that's the song that's been stuck in my head.
Because you had to play it.
Because I had to play it a lot. I had to learn it. It's not a bad song. I mean, it's fun to play. It's pretty easy. But about 3 minutes in or so, after like the last round of the chorus, it gets into like the heavier kind of Chucky section of the song, and then it kind of finishes out that way. So we'll go ahead and start it there. All right. It's the last little end of the chorus here.
Yeah, this was the best part of the song.
I know, right?
I was like, man, is this load or reload? And it's load. That's man. Okay, so I'm looking at this track, and the only track that I have is like an okay track that's added in one of my playlists is King Nothing.
Yep. I was looking at some of the songs off of this album, and I was like, I know these songs mostly because I've heard them on the radio.
I know these songs because I've played them 8 million times.
Yes.
1991.
But anyway.
No.
Wait.
No. That was their first record. Oh, geez. Scared me. This is 96. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was like mid-90s.
I was reading the review, and they're like, followed up their 1991 self-titled album with this load.
Yikes. Wah. All right, man. What was stuck in your head this week?
So today, okay, this is. I'm not gonna lie. I want to be transparent. I want to be honest. The stuff that's been stuck in my head this week has been RTJ4. I played a snippet for you last week, but Run the Jewels 4 has been stuck in my head all week, and that is all that I've listened to on every day except for today. Today was the first day that I took a break from RTJ4.
Oh, I mean, it must be good then.
I really like it. I mean, I've always liked Run the Jewels, but now too, like especially lyrical content wise, you know, it's very topical, and it just, I don't know, it gets the. I don't want to say juice.
We could talk about that more later.
It's the blood boiling in a good way, right?
Sure.
So I stopped today because A, you showed me a really cool song, and B, I got a notification that Lamb of God's album finally dropped, and I've been waiting for this album to come out. So it came out, and I was super excited. I gave it a listen through, and it's a good Lamb of God album. I had it on the background because I've been working today, but I still need to get my dedicated listen session that we've talked about. I still need to get my, like head in the zone, just absorb everything, right? But there's one song on here, and I know I've mentioned it to you a couple times. I probably mentioned it on the podcast before too, but it's the first track, which I guess you could call their intro track because it has like a minute and a half before it actually builds up into the song. But it's Memento Mori, and 3 minutes into the song, I always wonder, whenever you have a lineup change, if the band is kind of going to keep that sound, or if this person coming in is going to influence the sound more than you'd like, to put it in a polite way.
Yep.
But I have to say that even with the lineup change with the drummer, like it's not Chris Adler anymore, but I love everything about this. It's very much a Lamb of God feel. So about 3 minutes in, they kind of hit all of the accentuated parts of the track that I like.
Those toms and double bass.
Hey, feel at home, Like it's some decent fills, like not bad.
Like, it's really crazy, like how similar of a drumming style it is to Chris Adler. Like,
even like mixing of the drums too, and like tone, and like I'm surprised how like similar it is.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And Brody Blythe, sorry, Randy Walker.
Randy
sorry.
Walker. Oh no, we'll get it right one day. Good stuff.
So I'm sure there will be another track that pops in my head, but being that the album released today, and listening to it for the first time all the way through, this is the first song that comes on. I'm just like, okay, I'm buckled in. This is going to be a good time.
Oh yes, I definitely need to get a listening session in on this too. Maybe we'll have to do our own like listening session over Skype or something.
With the Skype filter and everything.
Maybe. Or we could just both hit play at the same time on our respective ends. That way we can get decent audio, and then we don't like pause it at all.
That's fine. If we can count in the recording in this podcast, I think that we can, count in pressing play at the same time. I think we can do it.
Sure. Nice.
We got that same wavelength going on, right? Like
yes.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. I see you.
Alrighty. So, for anyone who's been following the podcast for, a little while now, this year I started my own kind of New Year's resolution where I was going to discover a new band every week. I've been a little bit shaky. I missed one time, but I tried to make up for it. And last week I missed a band, so I'm making up for it tonight. So after last episode's recording session, we were talking a lot about like music about protesting and rising up, all of that kind of stuff. So I decided to look into some other genres of music that have those same themes. And it led me to the punk side of music, which then led me to this other subgenre of punk, which I had kind of heard of before, but never really gave a solid listen to. And that subgenre is crust punk. I don't know how to really describe it other than it's like faster and heavier than like your normal everyday punk. It's grungier, crustier in a way, I guess, is like that's where the term comes from. I don't know exactly.
Okay, before we get into this, crust is not an appealing, word. It's kind of like it's like moist for a lot of people, right? Like when I think of something crusty, like I don't think of anything good. Like I'm not I don't associate that word with good, happy feelings. Unless you're talking about like a pie crust, which I'm like, oh, okay, maybe, but that's not, I think, what we're going for here.
No, I think like it definitely is a term of like nastiness, like the nastier, the better. I think that's the theme that they're kind of going with in this whole subgenre, as far as like sound and, rawness, all of that. And then I also found a subgenre of that called blackened crust punk. So that's just mixing black metal in with crust punk. And I'm like, this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Love my mahi mahi blackened crust.
Yes, I do, very much so. So I was listening to a ton of different bands, just kind of jumping through like artist radios and playlists on Spotify. And I came across two bands that I really, really like, and I went through most of their discographies. I won't spend too much time on them, but the first one we'll take a look at here is called Wolf Brigade, and they have an album called Run with the Hunted. And on that album is a really popular song called Warsaw Speed Wolf. And right at the beginning, it just kicks you in the face.
You gotta start fast.
And this is pretty much all of crust punk. It's about this tempo. Like, I had yet to find a slow crust punk song.
Punk. Yeah.
I know. I just love the guitar tone, like the intensity, like everything about it. Yes. Almost reminds me a lot of like Motorhead too, in a way.
You see that? You can catch some of the similarities. Like it's tone wise, right? Kinda.
Like tone wise, like maybe a bit faster than Motorhead, but I mean Motorhead still had some fast moments.
Yeah, but nothing sustained, right? They could only go fast for a little bit and then have to slow down and back off.
Yeah. And I guess you'll be happy to know that a lot of crust punk songs are relatively short, so you wouldn't have to be bludgeoned with 30-minute songs.
I mean, that's one of the best parts of punk, right? I think we've talked about this, is that the reason I like punk is because, yeah, man, 2 minutes, 30 seconds is as much as you can hold my attention span for, so genre was made for me, man.
Yes. And there's another band that I came across here. I believe they're from Sweden. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, so I'm going to do my best. Martyrdud. I don't know if I did it justice or not. If I didn't, someone please leave me a comment and correct me so I can honor this band because I think they're so good. They have an album called List, and the title track off that album is really, really awesome. It's got this melody that comes through about halfway through the song, and when it does, everything like it gets filtered out, so it's almost like a telephone sound, right? And you hear like everything playing, but it just sounds like it's coming through a telephone, and it goes through that for a while, and then it comes back in with everything, and it just sounds really good. So we'll start it partway through that filtered section, and then when it comes in, let's see here, forgot to cue it up. 206, there we go.
Oh, the Skype filter on top of the telephone filter.
It sounds natural.
Yeah, no, this is awesome.
Yes, I love this so much.
This is good. Really good.
You seriously need to check out this entire album. It is fantastic.
This is really good.
Yeah, this is like my new favorite subgenre of music in general. Like I've been listening to this ever since the last episode. And I love where the melody goes too. Like they just vary it up a little bit. It's so good.
Yeah, it's all over, man. Like,
All right, I won't spoil too much. It is very, very good. So you, sir, go check it out.
Me, sir. Okay, all right, doing this. We'll see. We'll see how well I can type this this band into my search. Sometimes the ones you get, I got to get all the umlauts and everything the right way to find them. But I've gotten much better at doing that now. That you've
yes.
I'm convinced that's why I didn't know about all these bands, right? Just because I wasn't typing all of the right characters, like.
Exactly.
Like I probably could have put like a keyword search and just put like any one of these characters and in the genre of metal, and then they're like, oh, here you go. There's all this stuff.
Oh yeah,
great,
nice.
You shared something with me today, though. Another thing that almost took me away from the Lamb of God album and did for 6 minutes. That's a long song.
It is a long song.
It was really good.
Yes.
Want to talk about it?
I can let you talk about it since I talked about the other two just now.
So, one of the bands you showed me, and I think we featured in our top female artists in metal episode, was Unleash the Archers, a band I had never heard of, a band that I listened to and was instantly hooked, and listened to Apex, probably 30 times. Much like you did.
Way more than me even, but I know I need to listen to that one more for sure.
Good. So Unleash the Archers, great band. I loved what's the main song that they have, Awakening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Man, that song, the music video, everything about that just had me hooked on this band. And then when you told me like they're making a new album, like, what? And they released a teaser maybe like what was it, 2.5 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah, I think we took a look at it in the after show last time.
It was the ultimate tease, man. That teaser was horrible, like painful, because it cut out right before Brittany lets out like the crazy high vocal, just and it cut out right when that was gonna happen. We're like, what? Why would you do that? So you sent me the link to the official music video, which dropped, and I watched that today. And Apex was great because like they had a lot of kind of like medieval-ish, like mythological, like fantasy-esque,
right,
like themes going on. And then this one, which you kind of told me, and after doing some research, is all more like futuristic. It's kind of like synthwave in a way. Like they added a lot more elements to kind of modernize it, I guess. And it fits so well.
Yes, it does.
Melds like right into their style. And I know for you especially, right? Like I'm like, oh man, like I know I love this, but Steve, as soon as the synths come in, like he's gonna lose it. And there was only one appropriate gift to send you, and I did send it to you.
Yes, it was very
Vince
much
McMahon,
appropriate.
Yeah, straight up losing his shit, because it's so freaking good. Are we gonna play this song? Are you gonna play parts of it? Oh,
yeah,
great.
we can just start it from the beginning and actually hear that scream or singing, yell, whatever we want to call it. But she does. Yep. It's like clean singing, so we'll call it that. We'll play it from the beginning though. This, when I first heard this, it almost reminded me of like Dragon Force in a way.
Better.
But better, right?
But not like cheesy, right? Like I feel like Dragon Force almost cheesed it too much, right? Like
they leaned into that cheese hard and aged it forever, and it is very stinky.
Usually that's a sign of good cheese, but
not in that case. Here we go. Oh wait, almost. Almost. Don't want to miss it. Shh. Yes.
She hits one in the end too. It's just, you know how the hair on your neck rises? Like this is one of those times. She's one of those vocalists that will do that to my neck. Like there.
And she's harmonizing too. Like it's so perfect.
Very talented.
So I was paying attention to this music video, and I've seen it in other videos too. Do they not have like a dedicated bassist in this band? Because there's no one playing bass in any of the videos.
Oh, you're right. There's not.
At least the ones I've seen. Maybe I missed some. So I'm wondering if like one of the guitarists just does bass, and then like if they're already using backtracks for their live shows, then like they could just have the backtracking bass there too.
All right, we got to look this up now. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members.
Oh, so most of their pictures
the bassist dropped out in 2020.
Oh, creative differences.
I'm not sure. So you know how every band has like an instrument that they just kind of like churn through, right? There's bands that just like they'll churn through guitarists, or they'll churn through vocalists, or they'll churn through drummers, right? Well, it turns out the Unleash the Archers looks like they churn through bassists. They've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yikes.
Yeah. And they're right now without a bassist as far as I can tell. So,
okay. Interesting. Well, either way, whatever they're doing, it sounds good. So, I mean, they just need to keep doing what they're doing, in my opinion.
yeah. No, just keep it up. It's great. It's so good.
For sure. All right. So I think that just leads us right into our main topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't have any follow up this week, which is a new one for me. Usually I always have a little nugget to put in there, but this week nothing to follow up on, which is good.
All right. Cool.
So last episode we kind of got into the weeds towards the end of the show. We found something that I knew nothing about, you knew a lot about, and I asked you a couple questions, and that kind of like led us down the rabbit hole. That is one of the reasons that you and I kind of started talking about all this kind of stuff. So it's good for us to like maybe let's talk about, and I know you put this together, so I don't want to like take words out of your mouth or anything like that, but not leaning too much into the music per se this episode, but actually getting more into the music production side of things. So last week we were talking, not last week, but last episode, we were talking about the signal chain, and I had a couple questions for you just about the signal chain that I was using for, my guitar with my direct input and my amp modeling and how I was going to handle that. So I think follow-up questions, that I have, I think we covered a lot last time in terms of even like what you do to, find that sound, like how you're actually changing up your microphone placement, like where you're starting, how you're funneling. I'm curious. So when it comes to like presets for you, I'm assuming you have like 2 or 3 is what I could guess. So, for me, I'm thinking, okay, I need a good, rhythm guitar, tone. I just need that kind of dialed in. I need a lead tone, and then maybe like some crazy effects like to add in here and there. So add some effects pedals in that somewhere. So that's really all I had planned out in my scheme of things. So I have a couple, tones, like intro tones that I've started working on. And this is just for metal. I mean, I have separate tones for punk, but punk is punk, right? Like I'm not doing some crusty punk. So I'm not going to mix and match too much.
Yep.
So I have my rhythm tone, which is the easy one to start with, in my opinion. Like, okay, cool, I'll hit that, get that done. But the lead tone is kind of where I have some questions. So I know that you have a bunch of guitars, right? And I'm sure like your pickup arrangements are all different, and bridge, configurations are different, tone, pickup switches, stuff like that. So I have a Schecter that has like a 7 or 6 position tone switch, right? Just mixing between the front and the rear humbuckers.
Yeah, so that's usually those are 5 switches, a 5 pole switch. So it'll split each of the humbuckers up. So if you don't know what a humbucker is, if you ever see, okay, little history lesson. So if we look at some guitars like a Fender Stratocaster, if you go buy a regular Fender Stratocaster, you see 3 little thin pickups. Those are what are called single coils. They sound good. They have a very classic sort of sound. One of the major problems with it, especially when you start having higher gain amps, is that those single coil pickups, they make a really loud hum, and it's really annoying, and it's really hard to play like really distorted heavy metal with it. So the way you get around that is you just add another single coil, put it right next to each other, and then you have the coils or like the magnets for the coils wound opposite ways, so that the magnetism kind of cancels each other out and gets rid of that hum for you. So what the pickup switch then is doing is it's actually splitting that up electronically. So when you have your pickup switch all the way down, you're using your bottom or your bridge humbucker. And then when you go 1 position up, it's splitting that humbucker up. So you're really getting like a single coil sound. The middle position, it's playing both the neck and the bridge pickups. Depending on how it's wired, it's either both humbuckers or they're split, so you're getting 2 single coils. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, but most of them do just both the humbuckers together. And then the other two positions going up towards the bridge are just like or excuse me, going towards the neck. It's just how it was at the bridge. So all the way up, you're playing the full neck humbucker. One position up from or down from that is doing like the split thing.
Gotcha. So having that configuration set up, for all of my rhythm stuff, I'm always on the bridge humbuckers. Like that's just where I'm at, right? But for leads, I switch to the closer to the neck, right? So for that, when it comes to tone, since I have so much variability, how much do you rely on the actual like guitar to modify your tone versus like what you're modeling in Axe-Fx in your end? Or
it really, I do utilize a lot more pickup switching now. I didn't used to before, like when I first started out recording, because I was just like, no, everything, like if it's not the bridge pickup, it sounds like mush. Like I don't want that. And then I realized like when you do proper tone shaping with your amps and stuff, and then like you switch between the pickups, it's like, oh yeah, I can see the usefulness of this now. So what I do a lot of the times is kind of similar to you. For any sort of distorted rhythm tone, I'm playing on the bridge pickup. For leads, I'll do a mix of the neck and the bridge pickup, just kind of depending on the sort of tone I'm going for. If I'm doing kind of faster leads that I want to sound a little bit more smooth, I'll usually use the neck pickup because it has a bit more of like a rounder sound. You can, when you're playing fast on that, it gets kind of, I don't want to say muddy, but like if you're playing right, it just sounds like really, really nice and smooth. You don't hear as much of the pick attack. But there are times where on a lead, I want to have that pick attack. So then I'll just pop it back down to the bridge pickup. And then if I'm playing like a clean section, I found that putting it in the middle position where you have both the neck and the bridge pickups gives it a really nice balanced tone where you get like the nice crisp highs of the bridge, but you have the nice like full body sound of the neck pickup.
Okay. Just more, okay. When I said I was going to find my guitar tone by the end of the year, right? I was like, that's going to be easy. That's not going to be singing too. I'll be able to do that. And the more and more I'm looking into it, the more and more I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to take me so long. And it's going to be like, I feel like I'm going to be so moody about it too. Like just the person I am, right? Like one day I'm going to be like, I love this. And I'm going to put it away for 24 hours and come back to it like, I hate this. This is garbage. This is horrible.
There's kind of like a running joke with me and my wife because she knows I'm into music production. She knows about my Axe-Fx, things like that. And I'll come out of the studio one day and I'll be like, yeah, I made like the best like tone. Like I'm so excited to go record with this. And she's just like, that's what you said last time. So I could tell you from firsthand experience that trying to find your perfect tone is going to be your holy grail or your Moby Dick.
Like the holy grail, because I'm not
I was trying to bring it back around to Ahab, but I guess we're just leaving doom metal in the dust.
Too long, man. I mean,
too long
for a doom metal playlist. It's gotta.
Yeah, I know.
Stick to a song.
Keep it nice and nice and concise for people.
4 and 1/4 minutes. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yes. All right. Were there any other questions you had about guitars and like recording stuff?
I don't think so. I know we covered a lot last time in terms of the signal chain and amp modeling.
Yeah.
And I know I'm sure you'll have some plugins and stuff like that we can talk about probably later, unless you wanted to talk about them now, at least for the guitar side of things.
Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, we can kind of do these as we go. So I've got a list here of some free plugins and impulse responses that have kind of been my go-tos when I was like first starting out or getting serious in music recording here. So as it relates to guitar, I'll be taking a look at some amps, some cabinet sims or like some IR loaders, and then some actual impulse responses. All of these are free. We're going to be putting the links in the show notes, so that way, if you got anyone who's listening is interested in doing this on your own, you guys can get started really quick here. So the first set of amps I want to take a look at is by a developer. I don't think these are really like kept up anymore. Like I don't even think the original website is functioning anymore. So they're called Lepou, Lepou, French, I'm assuming. I don't know. But these are, they've got a collection of amp heads that sound really, really good. So they've got one that's modeling like a Marshall JCM 120 and like a Plexi head, which sounds really good. There's one that simulates an Angle Powerball. There's one that models a Mesa dual rectifier. There's another one that models a Soldano Solo 100 head. There's a specific like Plexi, like Marshall Plexi model. And then there's another one, which I actually just saw that I don't think I actually have that one. I may have to test that one out. But the link in here takes you to a website called VST for free. That was the only place that I could find these. But basically, if you have any sort of modern DAW nowadays, most of my stuff is Windows based because that's where I'm at. So a lot of these developers though do make them for Mac as well. So you'll find the appropriate download links there. I really recommend these amps because they sound really, really good when you pair them with really good impulse responses. So personally, I've used what they call the LE456. That's the Angle Powerball model. It's like a 4-channel head, and it's amazing, like the different amount of tones you can get out of it. It's just really great. Super high gain. So you can do anything from super clean stuff to really, heavy death metal or black metal even. So that's a super versatile amp head. I highly recommend that. The other set of plugins I want to look at is by a company called Ignite Amps. I was first introduced to them by their older impulse response loader called NAD-IR. It's really convenient because you can load in any sort of impulse response that's a WAV file. There's tons of impulse responses out there that you can either buy or download for free, and most of them tend to be in WAV format. So it's really easy just to kind of pull this up. You put it after your guitar head in the signal chain, and it's basically like we were talking about last time. It'll model the microphone type and position and the speaker type and all of that. So it's basically like you're plugging your amp head direct into a cabinet. So I was introduced to NAD-IR. I still use it to this day. It's great. And when doing research for this, I found that they made a new impulse loader plugin called Libra. And it looks like you can load up to 8 different impulse responses at the same time and blend them all together, which that is amazing. NAD-IR only does 2. So I've been functioning this whole time only using 2 possible IRs for any given guitar channel. Now the possibilities are virtually endless. So like I said, we'll be throwing up a link. You can go download that. And then there's one other amp head here that they have called Emissary, which is really awesome high gain, high distortion amp head. So I think those would be pretty good to get started there. Oh, and then I have a set of IRs here. This is the last thing for guitar, I promise.
Oh, and then there's this other one.
Stuff.
I'm like, oh my gosh, man! I know they're all free, which is great. So thank you for putting this together. I'm like, there's so many things. Like, when you're paralyzed by choice, right? I feel like I'm nearing that point. But go ahead. I don't want to step on your.
Yeah. So this is the last thing. So this set of impulse responses is by a company called Cult Holland Cabs. They're a German company. Their website might be in German, but I think you can just change it to English. But the link that I provided, it's going to go straight to the free impulse response pack. It's really, really good because there's, I don't know, I want to say at least like 50 different impulse responses. There's 4 different microphone positions. There's like at least 6 different microphone types, and I want to say maybe 3 or 4 different speaker combinations too. So like all of that multiplied by each other, like that's how many impulse responses you're getting. So you have virtually endless amounts of ways you can combine these to make your own sort of signature tone. So as far as guitar goes, you should be set with even just that.
I was good. Okay, so peeking behind the curtain here. it's no surprise I'm on the Mac side of things in this case, right? The yin to your yang, right? Like you're the Windows guy, I'm the Mac guy. That's just kind of how it's been. So the DAW that I use is Logic, right? Which Logic comes bundled with a bunch of like Apple design plugins. So I haven't ventured beyond what they offer. Mainly because I'm already scared with the amount of choices. Again, being paralyzed by choice, I'm like, okay, I have so many choices here. Like digging into some of these other ones is just going to increase that pool so much more. But okay, I'm going to make it a rule for myself is I'm going to have to stick to only one of these. So I'm going to have to do a lot of research just to pull down to one and be like, okay, I'm just going to roll with this, go from there. But sometimes I don't like talking to you, like real talk. Sometimes I really don't like it because you give me homework, right?
I'm a bad friend.
I finished my homework. I was happy the day that I was done with school and I was like, I don't have to do homework anymore. Now the homework I do, I get paid for. I don't have to pay people to do homework anymore. I mean, pay the school and me do the homework. I'm not saying I paid people to do my own.
I got you.
Okay.
We're good.
I'm just clearing it up for other people who, you and I know me, but other people might try to, throw me under that bus.
Oh man.
Yeah. Sometimes I want to tell you, Steve, enough's enough, you gotta sometimes good.
I'm just trying to push you and make you a better guitar player and music producer.
My heart so full. It's cranked to 11.
Don't think about it as homework. Think about it as I think of you as such a good friend. I'm giving you these gifts.
Require me to do work? Pretty sure they have a name for that already. It's one of the reasons why no one wants to get a gift that you have to assemble, right? I don't want to.
Am I the weird one?
You'll buy a gift for yourself. No, this is the thing. You'll buy a gift for yourself that you have to assemble. That's fine, right? You'll do that. But if someone gets you something, it's like, hey, here's this thing. I want you to have it, and it's not assembled. They've just created work for you. Now, granted, it may be something that you really want, but let's just say it's a run-of-the-mill thing, right? Let's say you have a housewarming party, and I'm like, hey, here's this cool thing, and it requires 3 hours of assembly. Have fun with that.
Yeah, and no, I wouldn't give it that kind of gift in that scenario. No.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to assemble things. And it looks like chat has discovered Unleash the Archers as well. So
yes, hooray!
Yes. Another. So you have to experience the band. And like I said, Apex. If you just listen to that album first, I chained through that whole album, and then it was all over from there. But
yes,
super happy that people are.
Yes, they have a really big back catalog too. So have fun going through all that because it's great.
Yes. Okay, man. So no more gifts for me to assemble, which is fine because I'm only looking at guitars for now. But if we look at some of the stuff that I've done more of my music production with, did we even get into your recommendation? We kind of did, right? Your last one that you were talking about?
I think so, maybe.
We'll come back to that.
I don't remember.
So see, this is the problem. Is you have a train of thought, and then I'm here to just derail it completely. Talking about housewarming gifts. So the one thing that I've had more experience in, mainly because of podcasts, is recording vocal tracks or mixing vocal tracks just for the podcast. So spoken audio is one thing. Singing and actual recorded music vocal audio is different. So in terms of how I'm producing the podcasts, at least for Casual Dads, which I still edit, is, let me see, I don't want to pull up my DAW and go through the whole signal chain because I feel like that'll be boring. But I do some simple EQ and a noise gate just to cut out like any like background noise or breathing and any just like low hanging fruit for silence. And then I add a compressor on each track. So I have, normally there's 2 to 3 hosts, right? Each host has their own set of EQ and noise gate and compressor settings. And then I send all of that to a bus where I'm doing some adaptive limiter and some normalization in terms of like volume. So some auto volume, like automation that happens there. And then I have a couple like sidechain ducking for like sensors and things like that. But really it's pretty straightforward. And most of the EQ is done on the channel side before it hits the compressor. And the compressor setting is just kind of where I fine tune to get the volume that I want. But like I said, spoken is, it's a different beast, right? It's a lot of long form audio tracks, a lot of single take stuff. And I haven't really messed around too much with like different takes, pop in, and punch in, recording of vocal tracks, stuff like that. So I know like adding some reverb, some chorus, some things like that, some echo, or delay. I know that there's kind of a flavor that most people go for. But all of that seems to me like pretty standard, like effects pedal stuff or effects, plugins. But tell me more about the vocal recording, because I'm actually really curious how this is going to go. Because just a more little background about me is like the only stuff that I learned about production, like actual music production and mixing, mastering, things like that, was a course on lynda.com.
Oh, that's awesome.
I taught myself Logic, with lynda.com, and then I took the class on recording and mixing, and then they take you, through a whole studio tour and saying like, this is the microphone you want for recording, vocals, and if you want a warm tone, you get this one, and these are the different types of mics. And I was like, all right, well, I'm definitely not going to have a studio, so this is all over my head. This guy's giving me like homework that I have to buy supplies for. I don't want to buy any more textbooks. I'm done. Like, I'm good. So yeah, tell me more about what you got going on there, because I'm sure yours will be a more budget-friendly version of this.
Yes. So I would say that if we're kind of starting the signal chain at the source, right? So I'll talk about just like a little bit of gear, a little bit of plug-in stuff as far as like my signal chain goes, and then I'll dabble a little bit into kind of the recording techniques of like layering and stuff like that. I'll try and keep it as concise as possible because I know with guitar stuff I can get carried away. So looking at the beginning of the signal chain with the microphone, usually for vocals you're going to want either a flat response mic like the one you have there, the Shure SMB7, or a type of condenser mic. Condenser mics will usually, they're going to impart some sort of flavor a little bit, right? Because they have a different sort of response curve. You can spend months and years researching, the best sort of microphone for a given person, right? Like this is why most studios have tons of different microphones, and that way they test a bunch of them out on, a vocalist coming in, so that way they can figure out really quickly which one is going to sound the best for that vocalist. So any kind of generic condenser mic that you can give that's relatively inexpensive is going to be just fine. The thing to know about condenser mics is that they require what they call phantom power. Most interfaces you buy are going to have phantom power in it, or like a bigger or any size mixer, they're going to have phantom power built into it. So that's not a huge deal. Basically means the microphone won't work until it has power coming to it. And you get that through your regular microphone cable as long as the thing you have it plugged into has phantom power. So that part's that. Moving on, as far as like plugins go, kind of what you were saying is kind of the route I go to. So any sort of like gating, I'll probably do some automation as well, pretty similar to like spoken word stuff. There's a lot of producers out there who spend a lot of time doing like automating the volume before it goes into any of the signal chain, just so that way the compressor isn't having to work as hard. Another way you could get around that is by adding multiple compressors in series that are all doing different things. So you would have one compressor that's working on just the super loud peaks, right? It's going to compress those down. Then you have another one that's working on bringing up the sustain of everything. So you're kind of doing two jobs, with two different things, but it's getting the job done, right? So
Yeah.
then obviously you want to do some filtering, gating before that. You can do tone shaping before or after with EQ. That's really, again, like I was saying before, it's like kind of up to you on how you approach that. There's no right or wrong way. Just like if one rule of thumb is that like if you're going to be boosting any signal, any frequencies before the compressor, that's more than likely going to get picked up in there. So that's going to affect how your compressor is going to react. So other than that, like you don't really have to worry about too much. And then of course, like I was saying before, saturation just to kind of help make the sound a little bit more full.
So in terms of effects, right, and in the signal chain, right, we talked about compressors, things like that, but where do you add in like your effects? Do you do it in like a different channel strip altogether? Like do you do them in sends? Is that how you normally do it?
Okay. Yeah, so I've started doing them in sends, and that's a way a lot of producers do it. And it's when you think about it, if you're utilizing other tracks, not just vocals that are, say, going to be using reverb, like the same type of reverb, right? Or delay or something, you could just have, one track that's just a send for reverb, one for delay, and then you can send any tracks you want to those in varying amounts. You have controls over the levels of those sends too. So yeah, I've been finding that's been like a really super helpful way to route things, have your computer not work as hard, because it all takes up CPU. And then too, it keeps your signal chain, or not your signal chains, your effects chains on each of your individual tracks down too.
Yeah. That's how I started it too. I was like, oh man, there's so many things going on here. Like I should probably start moving these over into different things. But one of the big things you mentioned, right, is like even just being able to control the amount of signal going to each one, like that I found, oh man, this is super useful. Like now it's opened up like tons of other options, right? Like, oh, like maybe I want to crank the reverb, but keep the delay a little bit lower, or I want to send more of like the left channel actually into the reverb. And like, do you go as crazy as having like different channels for your effects? Like, do you have a left and right channel for the effects, or are you just mainly okay?
I haven't gotten that far before. Maybe you can explain to me like how you have that set up specifically.
I don't have that set up.
Okay.
I was like, man, because I'm sure you could like, take the signal, and at least most of the times I'm recording mono anyway, right? Like I don't really need the stereo left and right. Like I'm not using any microphone that's going to really pick that up. I'm not. But in the mixing session, right, where we talked about mixing, I mean, heck, I even at one point there was a sample project that I opened and I mixed 7.1 surround sound. That's a chore, man. Props to all the people, in the credits list that go by, all those the mixers. Like, dude,
yeah,
sitting in a room with 7, speakers, just tweaking explosions all day. I mean, if you're Michael on a Michael Bay film, I'm sure it's just explosions all day.
Yeah.
But wow. So mine, it's just I mainly send everything just in bulk. I don't really do any panning before I hit any of the sends, right? For the podcast stuff, I do a tiny bit of panning before I hit to the process track, right? So usually I'll send, I'll balance like one of the hosts like 10% on one side and the other 10% on the other side. So that way, if there is any like crosstalk, and there's usually not much in podcasts, but it just gives them a little more presence in different parts, but not enough to where you're going to notice if you just have one headphone in. But just enough to maybe give it the illusion of like a fireside chat, right? Two people talking to each other. So that's really all that I've done with panning. But I guess this kind of answers my question, which is a good thing because it simplifies things. Is you're not really ever sending like, oh, I'm going to send the left channel to this effect, and then okay, cool.
Yeah, no. That, I mean, unless there's a cool application for it that I have yet to discover, then yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. But that's just me.
I just want to make sure you weren't crazy.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't think I'm crazy, but
just getting that into it.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else about vocals that you want to go over?
How do I avoid clean singing? Like, I just want to get rid of clean singing altogether, right? If clean singing could just
listen to more crust punk.
I think I'm good on vocals.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. So this one's the most interesting. The next one on here is drums, right? Okay. Now, I think we have to put a big disclaimer here. Are we talking about recording a drummer, or are you talking about in mixing and mastering the drum recordings, like, or are you talking about let's quantize this or put it all in MIDI drums and call it close enough?
We'll go with more of the former. We'll stick a little bit traditional with this because, like guitar stuff, plugins and software, all that, drum software is almost like its own industry. Like that's how prolific it is. And while it's amazing and it's really awesome for guitarists who, or anyone else who doesn't have access to a drummer or a drum kit, it's really nice to have a variety of plugins to just choose from and pre-programmed MIDI beats that you just throw on and you can make a song in 30 seconds. Like that's really cool, but it also kind of gets rid of like the human element, which that's not so cool. So we'll take a look here at just like trying to record drums in general. Most metal drum kits nowadays are what they call multi-mic'd. So you have individual microphones for each of the kit pieces, what they call the shells. So that's like your snare drum, your tom drums, and your kick drum. You'll sometimes have, these are all called spot mics too. That's like a technical jargon for what they're usually called. You'll usually have spot mics for the hi-hat cymbal, sometimes the ride as well. I've seen that. Maybe if you want to get some more presence out of like your a certain crash cymbal or two, you can spot mic those as well. But otherwise, yeah, it can get really crazy really fast. But
I don't think I've ever, I know like spot micing the hi-hat made sense to me, but all the other cymbals, I've just always taken those as like just the larger
the overhead.
Yeah, that's it.
So the overhead microphones is like the classic pair that, they stand up on really big stands over the kit, at least like a few feet. And they capture just the whole, capture the whole kit as a unit, right? It kind of helps glue everything together. That's where you're going to get, the majority of your cymbal sounds, things like that. You can also go as far too as like if you have the right studio room that sounds good. Most studios have room microphones that are way up in like the ceilings that will capture the whole room sound too. So especially on snares, room sound, like you got to have that there. That's really what makes that snare
where you
pop.
Feel it, man. Yeah.
Yes. So getting the problem with all of this is that the more microphones you add, the more problems you're going to run into with what's called phasing. So it's a natural phenomenon. It's physics. It's math. You have to place these microphones in just the right spot for everything to line up just right. And that in itself is an art form. Like most of the time in a studio, most of the time is spent miking up the drum kit properly so it's going to sound good. Because if not, if you have things phase canceling each other out, then you don't hear anything and it sounds like crap. So trying to get all that done in a concise way can take time, but it's definitely worth it. As far as signal chains go for after that, the same kind of standard plug-in chains that we've been talking about. So like gating, compression, EQ, all of that still applies. But not only to each of the spot mics, but you can process the overhead samples in overhead samples. I'm thinking in drum sample terms. The overhead mics and then the room mics as well. You can process those just the same way, and the way you do that will certainly have an effect on the overall tone of the kit. And then you can then combine all of those into like a bus, right? And then you can process that bus any way you want too. So like crafting a good drum tone it's a lot more tedious. You have a lot more moving parts than everything else, but the same rules apply.
So I've never envied having to record drums or mic drums or any of that because when again my lynda.com course, when they got to the drum thing, which was a long section, they talked about the phasing and it's like, hey, this mic's going to cancel out this mic if they're too close. You want to make sure that they're this way, and to think about, okay, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 maybe minimum, right? Mics that you're going to be mixing together for drums. So each one of those, right, all the stuff we talked about now, like especially with guitar, has pretty much been like one channel, right? Like you're coming in one signal and you're mucking with that. Now you're talking about dealing with 6 different signals, all with their own set of things. Come on, man, like that is bonkers. It makes you really appreciate. But I'll say this now too: is the more you learn, the more you appreciate, right? So I know I said I hate you, but I also I see the value in what you do, right? To me at least, right? Maybe not to other people, but to me, because you definitely appreciate things a lot more, right? You appreciate a good mix, right? When you hear it in. I think this goes with any craft, right? As content producers, as artists, right? Like you do something and someone's like, oh yeah, that's not hard. And it's like, well, yeah, no, it is hard. It's a lot of work, right? So seeing how things, come together makes you appreciate them a lot more. For drums, one of the things I've always wondered is dealing with multiple takes, right? So dealing with multiple takes on like a direct input device or, even like guitar amps, things like that. There's not as much, I think, variability in terms of sound from one session to another, right? Outside of player playing a little bit harder or this and that, right? But all that stuff, I think you can work around. Drums, I feel like that's like a different beast altogether, right? I feel like if you record, one take and you record that same take, right? Timing is going to be a little different. And especially if you're trying to mix, all these different drums together, how are you dealing with that?
So basically, in order to make sure everything's in phase, properly, right? If you do multiple takes, it's for every single track you're recording. So say for the verse, you nailed it. The chorus, you didn't. So you do a second take for the chorus. You have to then use all of take 2 for that chorus in order for it to be, in phase, right? But you can do some nifty crossfading to get from the verse to the chorus to where it sounds natural.
Okay. So you are punching in sections, which is mostly what people do. I mean, even with the other takes too. But I always wondered, like, how bad was it going to be when you now compound the issue and like crossfading? Yeah, cool. I can crossfade, maybe this take to this take, but now that's compounded, 6 times. So, okay. It doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal. So
it's really not, because in most DAWs too, you can, like, at least in Reaper and Sonar, which those are the 2 DAWs I've used, you can basically lock the items or the files together, right? So that way, whenever you or group them, that's probably another term that's used too. So like any sort of edit you make, if you move it, you cut it, you crossfade it, whatever. If you do it on one, it's going to do it across all of them. So it makes that super easy.
Yeah. The moving side, I wasn't too concerned about. I was just thinking more of the logistics of, a player playing in time, and
yeah, I mean, as long as like you punch in at the right time. I know, like with Reaper, I haven't found this on other DAWs yet, but when you do a punch in, you have 2 different options. You have a traditional punch in to where you say at this point you're going to start recording, but you'll start it like a few measures back or something, right? So that way you can either have the drummer play before the punch in happens, so that way as it's happening, like it just feels natural, or you can have the drummer just start right when the punch in is supposed to happen. The downfall to that is that as soon as you start recording, if there's any information before that happened, say the drummer came in just a hair too soon, it's gone. That information's gone. Reaper is really cool in that you can do
Logic.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if Logic was the same or not, but like you can record essentially before that punch in, right? So like my rule of thumb is that I always start 2 measures before, where I'm supposed to punch in. I can do a time selection. It'll automatically crop my WAV file to that, right? But wherever you started and ended your recording, all that information is still preserved. So that way, if you did come in a little bit early, you have that to work with. Yeah. So it's nice that Logic works that way too.
Yeah. I think for the punch in, they at least start recording beforehand, then they just start the track. That start region is where the punch in happens, but you can always move that, shift it around, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought drums was going to be a lot worse, even though we were talking about making like actual drums.
That was really just the tip of the iceberg. I really could go, but I realized that after talking about guitars for as long as I did, I was like, I gotta tighten this up a little bit.
Yeah, man, we still got another thing to go.
This will be quick.
So bad. I wasn't gonna go there. I'm glad you did.
Oh, I'm going there totally, man.
Okay, so well, it's got the fewest amount of strings, and it's it's usually
Well,
overlooked.
depending on what kind of subgenre of metal you're playing.
It's true. Could have 18. Who knows?
Yeah.
More strings, the better. I mean,
oh man.
Okay, so the fewest amount of strings, the lowest tone, usually gets lost in the mix if you're Metallica. Twice in one sitting for poor Metallica,
man. Oh boy.
But bass guitar, from my understanding, it's this sounds horrible. It's simplified guitar, right? Like it's like, okay, cool. You're kind of going around the same things of guitar. You're just mixing in a different frequency range. Like you're just playing around in that range more so than guitars. And I think, effects wise, I know we've said this, like I'm a fan of clean bass tone. And with the exception of, Tesseract, which I discovered, a couple weeks ago, and going into all of their bass shenanigans that they do, which is super cool. Usually I'm kind of a simple guy. I'm like, I like my bass, like no trouble, not Meghan Trainor again. Not again.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I like my bass simple. Like I don't like it like overly, distorted. I just like a nice clean bass tone. And I feel like most of that you're going to get from the player and the artist, like giving you the tone that they want. And there's not really a lot of, I guess you can do some like high pass filters, right? To kind of like get rid of any other like unwanted frequency ranges. But what do you do to clean up bass tone?
Yeah, so if we're looking strictly at a clean tone, you're going to treat it the same way as you would a regular guitar. So then the same sort of regular signal chain applies. You want to still filter out any of the unwanted frequencies. So anything super low, super high, everything in between, you have to really kind of play around with it to get it to sit well with everything else. So you have to carve out a spot in the low end to make room for the kick drum, right? There's different ways you can do that using just regular EQ, or you can do what you can do like a side chain EQ. So like on a particular band, whenever the kick drum hits, you can just have that signal duck down really quick. So that way that amount of the bass tone isn't lost the entire time, right? It's only when the kick drum's hitting. So the same could then apply to like the higher end for guitars, right? So like if there's a lead that comes in, but there's also the higher frequencies of the bass in that range, you can just have that duck down a little bit when the solos come in, things like that. Everything else, you just gotta find out where like the real meat of the bass tone is, and just make sure that's kind of highlighted, and get rid of everything else. You don't really need too much of it.
And okay, cool. That was pretty simple. And that
I could have gone longer, but we kind of touched on it last time, and I don't want to rehash stuff that we talked about last time.
I do kind of want to touch on one thing you mentioned, because it's a good point for us to kind of right before the wrap up is we talked about mixing all of these things individually, but we haven't talked about like mixing the entire ensemble together, right? Mm-hmm. And we touched on it here, right? Like, okay, with the bass in particular, right? Like we don't want that, stomping all over kick drum. We don't want kick drum stomping all over this. And we talked a lot about groove tracks. We've talked a lot about, centering things in the mix. And this is kind of where the production side comes in. So for you, when you're producing or, mixing stuff from your band, right? Do you have like a dedicated groove track in mind? Is it per track for you? Is it something that you kind of start, or is it all very much dependent on the track? I
think it would be more dependent on the track, but could you maybe be more specific as to what you're getting at? I think I kind of understand. I just want to make sure I'm going to answer it right.
Yeah. So I think, when I approach mixing, there's something I kind of want to have be the focal point, or stuff I want to mix around, where I want like kind of, this is like the main thing that I'm going to mix around, right? This is the piece of the track that I'm going to basically center around, right? So whether that's going to be like, okay, like this guitar riff, in this section is the driving force, like the most prominent, piece in this song. This is why I approach it by track, right? I think there's something to be said for mastering an album to sound, kind of the same, or at least continuity wise. But for each track, I feel like, okay, this one, the bass is like really where it's at. So I start by, signaling out that track, mixing that, and then kind of like bringing in other elements around it one at a time. And like adding in, okay, like I got the bass, so let's get that tone all nice and shaped. Let's bring in the drums next. Let's bring in guitars, let's bring in vocals. Do you kind of do a similar approach per track, right? Is it like you pick one track to start mixing and then bring in elements one at a time? Or do you just approach it like whole hog, just say like, no, I'm just going to start mucking around with stuff and see where I get?
Yeah, so I definitely take, I would say, more of the second approach. I don't usually go per track. I get everything at like a base level, right? So I do a lot of what's called gain staging. So anytime something's recorded, it's all relatively the same input level. And then from there, as I'm mixing stuff, if I know like there's some common moves I'm going to make, filtering, right? Getting rid of bad frequencies. I'm going to do all that beforehand, but I'm going to make sure everything is still level matched as I'm going. And then once I got all of that, I got things sounding pretty close to the way I want to. Then I start messing with the tracks, right? I'll go section by section, like, okay, in this part, the drums are going to be featured more. So everything else during this section, we could just pull it back a little bit. And then if next section it's guitars, then we'll, adjust accordingly. So it's really like I start everything at like the same level, figure out if like there's any major dynamics with the song, like we want everything to get quiet and then ramp up, or, it's loud, we want it to kind of die down over here. I'm going to make all of that stuff first, and then go section by section, figure out what needs to be highlighted, and then figure out as far as mixing, like, with EQ or panning, whatever effects, like, then that's when that happens.
Okay. Cool. Well, I feel like that's different from the way that's, that I approach it, right? And I'm trying to, decide if, because the way the thing that I liked about approaching things a track at a time, right, is like you really can kind of like get a feel of a song, right, or you can build a feel of a song. But again, I have produced exactly this many albums, so my word doesn't really count for much, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting just seeing the different approaches versus and this is something that I think with anything that you do, right? Once you start messing around with it, you find like kind of like your style, right? Like how you like to approach things and what your workflow is. It's one of the things when I've tried to, tell people, like, cause everyone asks, like, how do you edit a podcast, or how do you, mix this, or how do you even tackle that? And, all the stuff that I learned, I'm like, okay, well, in my workflow, this is kind of what I do. But that's not what you do, right? You and I do things a bit differently in our production, right? I just think it's always interesting seeing other people's like takes on things, right? And it's one of the things that I do enjoy talking to you about. Like when it gets, I remember, I think it was the first time you were explaining sidechain to me, which was years, like at least a year ago now. And you're like, yeah, so why
I remember
just,
this.
why don't you just sidechain it there? I'm like, do what now? And you're like, yeah, just do a sidechain. And then that, I'm like,
is that even a word? What are you saying, man?
I'm like, okay, stupid me. I'd always seen the option for it, right? Like it's always there. Like when you open the compressor.
I don't know what that is.
I'm like, okay, fine, like, whatever. Ignore that one. I'm gonna click the buttons I know, right? And then once you explained it to me, I'm like, oh man, I got like 18 things I can use that for now. Like right now, all these crazy convoluted workarounds I was doing before. I'm like, well, this is now I feel like a noob. So
it's all good. And that's the whole like learning process, right? It's like you do it one way because that's the only way you know how to do it. But the more you talk to people, the more you learn. You're just like, oh, well, here's a shortcut I could take.
Automation was a killer one, man. When I discovered like automation in DAWs, and I know this is something that not all DAWs have had for forever, right? But it's something they all start to feature now, is like, the automation for, like you said, volume. Like I think that's one of the biggest ones. But also like the fader and stuff like that. And I remember setting up, because I have a MIDI like controller in terms of like what I could plug into the DAW, and I was like having it read, tone movement and stuff like that, or knob movement. I was like, this is epic. Like, cause
yes.
When you pan like left to right in songs, it's not a linear or even like it doesn't really conform. If you want it to sound right, like you may like tweak it a little bit. Like it's not going to be a unique, like straight uniform, like motion, right? It's going to be kind of like the analog feel, right? You see what I'm doing here, right? You see what I'm doing? The analog
I
feel?
know what you're doing. It's off the screen, but I know what you're doing. You're turning the knobs there and
No,
moving the
but
faders.
okay, yeah, I see. It's below the screen, not those knobs. These knobs.
Ugh.
But it's more of like an analog motion, right? It's more of a human controlled motion, and that was one of the things that really kind of blew my mind, right? Because I work in digital all day long. That's just kind of like who I am. That's what I do, right? And that's for me how my workflow goes. But having like this analog, or as close as you can get to an analog type movement, was really really kind of interesting to me. Like I thought, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm like, that's how people used to do it. I mean, emulate that as much as you can, I guess, but make it better, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah, pretty much, man. Pretty much.
Learn from the past and be better.
Yeah, totally.
Better? Yeah.
Cool. Was there? Okay, so there is. I think that kind of rounds out pretty much this main topic, right? Unless you had any other questions. All right, cool. There's a few other sets of plugins I want to talk about really quick. We'll throw up links, but these are good, really, really good mixing plugins. Again, all free. The first I want to talk about is by a company called Melda Production. They make really good plugins just in general, but they do have a free bundle. You get in the ballpark of like 25 to 50 plugins, I think. All of them are really good, really high quality. The interfaces they can be customized. So that's really cool. So we'll throw a link up there. You get all your basic stuff, compressor, EQ, saturation, reverb. Then you get some really awesome like creative plugins too. You get like your phasers and flangers. Wow, that was really hard to say.
Yeah,
phasers and flangers.
The same sentence. Yeah, phasers and flangers. Yeah. Flanders and phasers. Oh wait.
Yeah. Flanders phaser.
Someone hasn't made that. I'm going to copyright that right now.
Do it. They've got a lot of other good utility plugins too. So again, check them out. They're really awesome. The other company I want to take a look at is called Dead Duck Software. I believe this is just one guy who makes free plugins in his spare time because he's a coder / software engineer and he likes audio production. They've got one plugin there. It's a channel strip plugin. So it's basically combining high and low pass filters, gate, compression, EQ, input and output volume, and a few other things like phase, inversion, and you can flip the pan, things like that. All of that in one plugin, and I think that's amazing. So like on most of my like guitar tracks or vocal tracks, whatever, like that's pretty much going on there immediately because you can do a lot just with that. They have a few other basic plugins too, like reverb, delay. They've got like a bit crusher that's really cool. Plus a lot of other really cool plugins. So go check them out. They're awesome.
Sweet.
Nice.
Plugins. So many plugins.
All right. So then I've got one thing for wrap up here. I can't remember if we discussed this or not. Vinyl. Are you pro or anti-vinyl? I would say anti-vinyl.
So we have not talked about this. Funny enough, this was one of the discussions in the very first podcast episode I ever recorded, back in 2015, I want to say.
Wow. Nice.
And it was this debate with if you're an analog or a digital person when it comes to music, analog or digital music, right? So when it comes to that, I still stick to my original statement, which is I understand that in terms of an analog signal, there's a lot more variance you can get, right? In terms of like, hey, it is a true actual waveform. It is not, it's an actual shape, right? Like it's based on physics and room and dynamics, everything, right? And digital is purely just, trying to emulate that as best as it can, right? And if you look close enough, right, you're going to see that, yeah, it's not as full or as true to the recording as you're going to get if you listen to it like on the master recorded vinyl, right? Or a true like from copy over from the master recording vinyl. To that, I have to say 99% of the time, convenience is going to win for me, right? And the fact that I can pull up any album at any time with the click of a couple buttons or a voice command to whatever, speakers in the room, I have to say, man, like, I love it. And the digital space of things, like, I think that's always going to win for me. I would love to be a vinyl guy. Like, I really would. Like, I would love to invest the time, right, to have a good setup and a good set of listening headphones and a good listening room and a good environment, right? And I would love to do that. And I would love to, support the artists that I really enjoy. Because I think one of the first times I really appreciated music is when I listened to something other than what was like lossy compressed. When I listened to the first time I listened to lossless audio, I was like, oh my gosh, this is life changing, right? But I feel that only goes so far, right? And I feel like technology has gone so far in terms of like trying to catch up to vinyl that now it's very tough for most human ears to tell the difference. And especially if you've been to as many metal concerts as we have, or punk rock concerts, my hearing can't tell anyway unless I crank it. So I'm digital all the way because purely for convenience. I take it with all of its, concessions, right? Even if I'm not listening in full quality all the time, like I take it as that. So vinyl, I'm a nay. And I think if I was a yay, it would purely be a hobby.
Sure. I agree with that to an extent. I think more times than not, I am also a man of convenience, and I don't always know where I'm going to be. And if I'm going to be working, if I'm going to be driving somewhere, whatever, like I want to be able to have access to something really quick to listen to. So I do, like you, agree that it's really nice to have that convenience factor. However, I've kind of been almost forced in that direction, mostly because I had a large CD collection that, if we remember, like almost a year ago, got stolen out of my car. So it's made me think a lot about physical music. And I think I have like 5 actual CDs left. One of them was Lamb of God because that was in my CD player still. And I found this like 2 months ago. So woohoo for that. But also I still enjoy going to a record store and just like sifting through what they have. Like I something about it. I think you might have to be a certain type of person for that, but I enjoy just kind of seeing what other you're shaking your head. It sounds like you don't like that.
I am so antisocial. I don't want to go anywhere to have like.
Oh, I'm antisocial too, and like I always am. If someone gets near me, like I'm moving around to a different side, so that way I can look at something else in the meantime.
Man. Like that's.
I push myself. It's like, worth it if you find something that's good, though. In my opinion.
Okay, so anyway, you like going to the record store. You like picking out. Okay.
Yeah, so I like going out and seeing what there is and finding something that I wasn't expecting, right? And since my wife has a vinyl collection too, I think by proxy, like I'm kind of leaning towards that way too. So I would probably say, yeah, maybe vinyl collecting or purchasing whatever, that does tend to be more of a social thing. I'll give you that.
The other thing too, and I'll say this, is that I got kids, man. Like, do you think I could keep Dirty Kid Paws off of a vinyl collection? Like, where would I put that? How could I? You're shaking your head. No, like there's
no, you couldn't. And I understand. Well, as much as I can, because I don't have my own kids. But
again, I'm throwing something into that other 1%, but it all still just sums up to 1% that I would prefer this over that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't get, like, I don't ever expect that, like, I'm going to recreate my, CD collection on vinyl. That's not my expectation. But I think the collection that I have now and that will grow from here is just stuff that I find unique that I wasn't expecting to find, but that I just happen to really like. And part of the reason why I bring this up is that my wife went to a record store last weekend with her mom, and I was busy doing something else. And she came across a double LP Death album, and it is really awesome. It is Individual Thought Patterns and it has a live recording of one of their shows in Germany. I haven't listened to the live album yet, but I love that album. It's great. So that's why I brought up vinyl. It's just because of that.
Okay. No, that's, it's all fair. And I think definitely, like, I know that there's a large camp of people who are all in on vinyl. Like that's just what they want to listen to all the time. But fuck, dude, I don't even own my music anymore. Like,
oh my gosh. Don't hold back, Adam, please.
No, I'm not. Like, I don't even own it. Like, I'm purely renting music at this point, right? And that's the level that I've stooped to for convenience. Now, I still support bands that I do like, right? I'll go buy merch, or I'll, buy a CD that I like. And I've even almost gone as far as buying vinyl for, certain bands that I like. So if August Burns Red, I bought it, but man, like the industry has changed so much, right? In terms of, you don't buy music to even own it. Like you're purely just renting it, right? And even when you buy stuff digitally on digital platforms, you don't even really own that, right? It's like you're leasing it, to be honest, because there was this whole thing, and I forgot who, there was some like celebrity that when they passed away, they wanted to gift their entire like music collection to whoever, right? And because it was digitally purchased, or parts of it were digitally purchased, they could not be considered in that will. Like, because you can't sign over, like give over to someone your purchase history for, a digital receipt. It's like there is no
I see what you're saying.
Physical good to inherit.
Yeah, I got kind of confused when you were saying that. I thought you meant like an artist wanted to do that, like with their music, and I'm like, well, they kind of own the rights to it, right? So they have that. But I see what you're saying. Right? You're talking about like a consumer.
Yeah, consumers. Like, dude, we don't even own anything anymore. So I think it's gone so far, the other way. It's gone so far to the convenience side that I'm just like, well, man, I guess that's where I'm at.
Yep. All right, I think that's a good ending spot. Yeah.